Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Ain't Dead Yet podcast. Today's guest, my boy, Matt Ritchey. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, appreciate you having me on, brother. Glad we're finally doing this.
Absolutely, man. You know, when I think of you, and we've known each other now for, I guess, going on over 3 years, and the way that we connected and got to know each other has been really special for me. And not only do I think your story has a massive impact on others, I think that your progression through life continues to have an impact on others, and I think a lot of that's tied to your vulnerability. So I'm glad to have you here today, man. It's a blessing to have you here.
Hey, man, I'm glad to be here, brother. I appreciate you, Trip.
Absolutely, man. So just to get the viewer and the listener kind of settled, if you will, on a little bit of your backstory, kind of where you're from, your upbringing, your parents, siblings, anything like that, just to kick us off.
Yeah, man. So, I grew up in Houston, Texas, small town called Spring, and two brothers, one 2 years older, 2 years younger, Michael, Matthew, Mark, 3 and 2 years apart. It's kind of funny. Grew up with both parents, never divorced, stayed together. Grew up, started out in a small house and moved over to our house that my parents are still in now over in Klein. And, I always tell people, we had everything we needed growing up. We weren't going on ski trips to Aspen or taking cruises every other month, but we had everything we needed. We were able to get clothes for school at the start of the year. We had food on our table, parents that cared for us. We were in extracurricular sports. Wasn't, doing select football or anything like that like I wanted to growing up, but, we had everything we needed. We had Christmases that were full. Parents that loved us, parents that emphasized spending time with family, all those things, So in that aspect, I'm very blessed to have grown up in the family I grew up in. Spring, Texas, that was an interesting place to grow up in as well. Like the people we grew up around over there, it was just such a drastic difference in variety. You had people who were growing up in apartments and slums with broken families, going to school with people who were driving Porsches into the parking lot. But everybody hung out together. Nobody judged anybody for being better or worse than the guy in front of them. And I think that was a pretty cool place to grow up in. As a younger kid, I spent a time with a lot of, I guess, troublemakers. I don't know why I kind of gravitated towards those as a younger kid. I didn't really realize that, but I guess I just kind of liked the rush of hanging out with kids that were kind of going against the status quo, or maybe not necessarily doing what I guess our parents would like us to be doing. I mean, we were just kids, like skipping class or doing stuff like that. Not really anything bad, but, definitely a start of a mindset that I think carried with me over my life, but we'll get into that later. But I think growing up, I struggled a lot with anxiety, not fitting in. Like one of my biggest things growing up was I had a lisp, really bad lisp, and a hearing loss. So I didn't really get to hear a lot of people the way that you or maybe other people did when they were growing up. So communication was a big part for me. So I kind of isolated myself with that as a younger kid. I never really noticed that until I got older. But, I think having the family that I did growing up allowed me to kind of navigate that in my own way and kind of grow and learn from it. But, yeah, I mean, my sorry, bro, I'm kind of...
You're good.
Yeah. Bro, sorry. Is there any way we could...
No, you're good. We'll keep rolling. You're fine.
Yeah.
I think that I wanted to dive into a piece of that real quick, though. You were talking about the hearing loss, the lisp.
Yeah.
Like growing up in Spring, Texas, I mean, were you bullied? Was that something you dealt with, or was the isolation
for sure.
Okay.
For sure. I remember in elementary school, I mean, even going back to when I was in Catholic school, because I went to Catholic school from like pre-K all the way to third grade. And there were kids in my class, because I was wearing hearing aids at the time, just for like a couple years before my dogs ate them and I lost them. But yeah, no, I wore the big bulky ones. So they were these big giant molds that stuck in the side of your ear. And there was a giant earpiece that hung off the back. So, I mean, it was very, very clear that I had hearing aids. And, there were kids in class that would reach over and pull them out of my ear and hide them behind my chair, and I'd have to awkwardly go find them. And the teachers never really did anything. They just kind of said, class, pay attention. So to me, I thought that I was the one who was in the wrong because I guess I was wearing hearing aids. Like I was different. I wasn't supposed to be there. And nobody ever really told me that that was not normal. I just kind of thought that there was something wrong with me. And then the lisp situation was another thing on its own because it's almost like every time I would talk to kids, like I would get something in return. And over the years, I just kind of got used to people shitting on me. And that's not okay, but growing up, I kind of learned to harness that and, utilize that to my advantage, which is I think where track and my fitness and stuff like that kind of came into the picture.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to pivot into that conversation because I think it's such a big part of not just your childhood, right, but like who you are today.
Yeah.
I think that that transition started around sport and athletics. So before we dive into like you getting to the University of Texas as a thrower,
mm-hmm.
Take me through so middle school, high school, were you playing other sports?
I was in football. Yeah.
Okay.
So football was the first sport. I mean, I did baseball as a younger kid, t-ball like everybody did, and soccer when I was in like pre-K. But first sport I really got into was football, and that was in 7th grade. Like I said, I didn't do select football like a lot of my buddies did. I didn't get to do peewee like I wanted to. So 7th grade was that year where I kind of started that drive into sports. That was my chance to all right, I'm finally get to be a part of a team, and get to play football with all of my buddies. I get to kind of prove myself, I guess. So football was definitely that entry into lifting weights, exercising, seeing my body change in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of people drive that same connection from athletics. And if you're lost in any way and you feel isolated in any way, it is a platform to prove yourself. Because no one cares in between the lines. Like if they talk about this conversation all the time, this came up with a buddy yesterday. The coach isn't going to play a player that isn't the best player, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a hearing challenge and a lisp, but you smoke the kid who's in front of you that doesn't have a hearing challenge or a lisp, you're going to play. So it's a level playing field. That's what I tell people, and that's what athletics is. It gives you an opportunity to level the playing field. No one cares about your disabilities.
Yeah.
Everyone just wants the best person to play, and you know what you're capable of, and you're able to go perform in that way. You're able to play, and I think that that's empowering for a lot of people, especially kids that are struggling with something within themselves, to be able to go prove themselves to your point, like what you just said. So I think that's such an important part, not just of your story, but a lot of people's story, and I can relate to it certainly. It didn't matter what you made fun of me for. Let's go head to head.
Exactly, dude. That was one thing I've learned that really early on. Especially the weight room was a big one for me. I wasn't that great on the football field, but the weight room was an area where I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to be a little bit different, and I think that's where I kind of realized this was an area of my life that I could control. And it doesn't matter if I can't hear you very well. It doesn't matter if I'm the short, chubby guy or I have a lisp or whatever it may be. It doesn't matter because I'm going to run circles around you in the fucking weight room. And I'm going to hold on to that all day. And I think at a young age, I learned that was an area like fitness and sports was an area where nobody can take that from you. You can always be the best person or the best person in the room if you're willing to work hard enough, and that's one thing that no disability or setback in life could really take from you, There's
two cliche terms or statements that I think of when you say that. And both of them, for me, came from athletics. One was in high school, and we had this coach, and he would always say, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog.
Yeah.
That's the truth. And then I had a college coach that would always say, hard work beats talent when talent don't work hard. And so for me, similar to you're saying, size doesn't matter. You can outwork pretty much anyone if you're willing to go to that place. And I think that drive, I don't think that drive is natural for everyone. I think it's a gift. And I think that gift is also a curse, right? And it creates some challenges in life as well. And we'll get into that here in a minute. But I think that to start off, that was a gift for you. Right. It was a gift that you found athletics. It's a gift that you found a way to compete. It's a gift that you found a way to lift yourself up on your own. And so I think that's powerful. So where does throwing come into the picture?
Yeah, man, that's actually funny you mentioned that because Seventh grade year, there was this thing in off season in football where track would start, and they'd have all the football players do track. And if you didn't want to do that, you had the option to stay in the off season and work out and get stronger and faster in the strength and conditioning program. So seventh grade year, I stayed in the off season. I did the strength and conditioning program to get stronger, and I got extremely good. I surpassed so many people in the weight room, both physically and conditionally, like on the track. So I loved that. And then eighth grade year, after football season, we had that option again, but the coaches decided to change the rule. They was like, all right, well, everybody has to do track, because they were trying to go for the Triple Crown, where we win basketball, football, and track in districts. So they wanted everybody doing track. I'm like, well, coach, like I'm not a track star. Like I'm not a hurdler. I can't jump. I'm not going to do pole vault. Not a chance in hell. I tried sprinting, but it 50 other guys that could smoke me on the track. So my coach was like, all right, well, just go across the street, go to Coach Petco and do the shot put. And I'm like, I'm not a big guy either. Like, whatever. Like, if I got to be here, I'm going to at least go do something with the stronger guys, and I can hold on to that. So I went over there, and Coach Petco was the guy who ran the strength and conditioning program in the off season. So I got really close with him seventh grade year. And I remember walking up, and he introduced me to everybody, and he handed me a shot put to see what I could do. And I chunked it like 20 feet. It wasn't a big deal. And then he moved me to the discus, and he had one of our guys, Daniel Ayala, show me how to throw a discus. And he was like, yeah, you just hold it like this, hold it flat, and just try to throw it as far as you can. I'm like, well, that seemed pretty self-explanatory. So I grabbed the discus, and in one throw, I threw it like 85, 90 feet, which I didn't think was a big deal. But they were like, dude, like that was really good for somebody who just did that for the first time. And I think that one little piece of affirmation was like, okay, I'm good at this. Like, fuck it, let's take it and see how far we can go. And I didn't like jump in and say like, oh, I want to be a college athlete like there. But then that moment was kind of like, all right, well, this is something that I can enjoy in the off season and just see what I can do with it. So I showed up to that track practice for the next couple weeks, ended up making one of the track meets and ended up scratching all of my throws for that meet. But I realized like this was something that I have potential in, but I'm not great at, like definitely something that I could work on and get better at, which to me kind of reminded me of the strength and conditioning program we did in seventh grade. This is something I can dial in on, work on, and get better at,
I totally get it. And it's funny in my brain as I'm listening to you right now, I'm hearing your story connect itself. And I've heard the story numerous times, and we've talked about it a bunch and outside of a podcast. And it's still incredible to me to put pieces together. And I'm like, oh, it makes sense. It makes sense why I chase some of the things that I chase. And I think what I keep going back to in my brain is it's an opportunity for you to prove to yourself that you're worthy, right? But to prove to others that you're worthy regardless of their judgment. And I think Ironman's a lot like that. Ironman doesn't care who you are. It doesn't judge.
Nobody.
Right? It doesn't care. You have to put in the work. You have to go through the training. You have to go through the process. And then after all of that, you still might fail. And so ultra marathons, same thing. All these different types of events. And so same as throwing, right? You can put in all the work and still fall short.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting to me is putting that together. But to get back on topic, I'm thinking about, like, I'm trying to put myself in that position. Like, hey, man, you got to be involved with track and field. If they would have told me that, I probably would have been like, bro, ain't no way.
I tried.
Like, there's no way. What am I going to do? I can't run. Like, you know that. Like, yeah. I'm not a runner. I'm good within like a 5-yard box or a 7-yard box, but there are no track events that are like that. And so I would have had the same, like, what do you mean I have to go do this? I don't know. So I understand that. So you get to the field though, and then I'm trying to imagine that too. Like, hey, put this in your hand and toss it. I'm thinking about myself. Like, if someone said that for me, like, I'm not worried about form. I'm just going to send this piece of whatever it is into orbit and then like laugh about it and be like, whatever. But it's funny that you did that. And they were like, holy shit. Like, they see potential from throw one, even though like you might not even have seen it, at that point. But when you heard them affirm it, you're like, oh, damn, like, I got a shot at this. And so help me get from that first season to like you going every day. Like, when does that kind of kick in?
Man, I've told this story so many times, and I think, man, it's crazy to think about, because this one little mindset shift has just kickstarted so many things for me in my life. But I remember after that track meet where I told you I got to go to after 2 weeks of starting and throwing, I scratched all my throws and I didn't do very good at it. And at lunch, the guys on the team were like messing with me, like, oh, Ritchey, like, you're just out here because they're trying to fill in a spot, blah, blah, blah. And I cracked a joke and I'm like, oh, fuck you guys. Like, I'm going to go to college for this shit. And they all just shitted on me, dude. I was like, I kind of took that to heart because like they just would not stop messing with me about that. We get to track and they're like, oh, there's track star over there going to make it to the Olympics. And we'd get to class and they'd crack jokes with the teachers about how Matt said he's going to go to college for throwing. And I took that personal, bro. I was like, you know what? Like, what if I did do that? Like, what if I did somehow find a way to make that a reality? Like, could that be like the biggest slap in the face or proving everybody wrong? And at the time, like, I kind of just decided to carry on with that joke. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to keep telling everybody that. Why not? Then after a couple of months, I was like I kind of do like this. Like, I like throwing. Like, I like the idea of being out there trying to get better at something that everybody thinks that you're not good at, but you still enjoy it even if you aren't who they say you are, you know? Then I remember when I started, like, you can't go buy a discus at Academy or a shot put, you know? So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I got those, I know you've seen them before. You know those little skinny barbell weights you can get from Walmart? They're like the 1-inch bars. You know those plates that they have that are kind of rounded on the edges? So I taped those up with electrical tape, the little 2.5 pounders. And I'd ride my bike up to the elementary school behind my neighborhood with all of these weights in my backpack, just weighing down, dragging on my back tire, and I'd pull them out, and I would just start throwing them, spinning around in the dirt, trying to figure out, like, how this sport works. I mean, dude, like, when you watch a video of somebody throwing, you think, like, oh, wow, like, that doesn't seem too bad, you know? Like, they look like they know what they're doing. It's a smooth, effective motion. But, dude, when you're trying to train your body to spin in a ring with a discus and find a way to release it straight, like, at first, like, dude, that's such a challenging task. Like, it's not a normal body movement. You know, it's not like a bench press or a sprint. Like, it's just very simple lateral. You just do it. You know, discuses, there's so many different moving parts to get the discus out and to get better at it and throw it farther each time. And I was obsessed with that, you know. And I think for me, like, I take a lot of beauty looking back now that I was so okay with not having anything to throw with, to not having a coach, to not having the skill sets. I didn't have the size. I was like 5'4" in 8th grade. You know, like, I wasn't a very big guy. I was strong, but like, dude, for a discus and shot putter, I mean, they had like guys like you. They had the big linemen out there who were just strong enough to muscle it out there. Like, I was not built for that sport. So I started off with nothing, like, at all. No hope, no talents, no real support. I mean, my parents thought I was crazy throwing metal weights around in the backyard. I even threw one through the back of my garage one time. My dad was like, what are you doing? You know? But for me, like, that's such a special time period in my athletic journey because, like, I didn't have any athletic accomplishments. I didn't have anybody like, dude, like, keep going. You know, like, dude, like, you are capable of doing so much in this. Like, dude, keep going. I didn't have any of that. Like, it was all coming from inside. And it wasn't forced, it was natural, you know? And I think a lot of people in this world, I don't think many people ever get to experience that kind of feeling in their life where they love something so much to where they don't even, yeah, it's hard work, but they don't have to try to get themselves out of bed to do it. It's like, dude, like, this is what I'm doing today. This is what my goal is. And there's nothing going to get in the way of me trying to achieve that. And I just took that and I ran with it.
Yeah. I think it's so well said. And I can connect to it on different levels too with, like, long snapping is a very, like, a rare, like, no kid, like, a kid wakes up and one day and is like, I want to be a long snapper. Right? Same as discus, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Like, it's not most kids' dreams.
It has to find you, you know?
But, like, it's one of those things, to your point, like, there's long snapping for me for a long time was self-taught. I was like, oh, I could do that. I don't know how, but, like, I can figure it out. I can figure out how to put my hands and do all these different things. And it wasn't until probably 10th grade that I had any, like, legitimate coaching specific to that. And so up until that point, it was self-taught. But what was a little bit different is, and similar, like, I remember maybe 9th grade joking kind of in the same way of like, hey, I'm going to go to college for this. Like, I'm going to go D1. And I remember, like, that was laughable.
You know, anybody who said they were going D1, dude, you're in for a laughing stock.
Well, and it was, I think there was a lot of weird feelings around it because going Division I as a long snapper is a lot different than going Division I as a running back or a quarterback, right? That's just the truth. And I think that especially at that time. And I think that, you know, a lot of the other athletes in the school that were playing other positions that were more athletic than me, like laughed at me trying to do this niche thing to take me to the next level. But when I look back on it, like I can't name anyone else who's went to my high school in the last 30 years that's went Division I like, you know, top tier football. There's been a couple guys go Division I AA, and those schools are now Division I but they weren't when they went. And so I take a lot of pride in that, right? But it took someone to believe in me to take it to the next level. And that first person for me was a guy named Thomas Kessler, and still a close buddy of mine, still, you know, back in Virginia. He's actually the varsity wrestling coach at that high school. And but our high school has a lot of tradition, a lot of history. We all came through it. He came through it. He was a Big Orange wrestling champion. He was all district in football. You know, he was a next level athlete, and he was a bigger dude, but he was also a punter, right? And he kind of took me under his wing. You know what I mean? He's like, you can be good at this. Like, you're good at it. And so that motivated me to like push into a deeper space, I think. So did you have anyone, like, do you remember the first person that did believe in you that kind of gave you that push?
Yeah, I don't think I've actually shared about him a whole lot in my fitness journey, but there's a guy named Carlos Scott. He used to play, I want to say it was the 49ers. He used to be a lineman for the 49ers. He was a discus thrower at UTEP, and then he ended up he never made it to the Olympics, but he's gone to 4 Olympic trials. Just huge guy, man. And he was, I was out there throwing one afternoon. This was like, I want to say like a year and a half, 2 years into throwing at this point. Had some discuses. I didn't have throwing shoes yet, but like I was pretty on my way established in the sport. And he was out there working with a guy later turned into one of my best friends and training partners, Brody Gowing. And he was out there throwing with them in the field. And I was using the discus ring. So whenever they got there and he was training him, they had to use the other side of the field. And I just saw this big guy out here coaching somebody for discus. And dude, from somebody who had been alone in the sport for a year and a half to see somebody out there, it's like being a black wolf in a school of sheep and you finally see another wolf walk over. You know, it's like this is cool. Like, I'm going to show this guy what I've got, you know, see if he recognizes me. So I started chunking my best throws out there, and I'd kind of like throw them in their direction to try and get their attention. And after he was done coaching Brody, he walked over and he just sat on a bench and just watched me. And I ended up walking over and introducing myself to him. And he's like, you're just out here like all by yourself? I was like, yeah. I was like, I just love throwing. I'm just trying to get better at it. I was like, so what's your deal? Like, I see you coaching that kid over there. Like, are you a professional or what? Then he told me his story. And that's when he went on to tell me, he's like, well, I walked over here because like I admire that you're out here training and doing this on your own at such a young age, and you're not bad. There's a lot of stuff you could work on, but you're not bad. I was like, well, show me. Like, what do I need to work on? And he was like, well, he's like, I charge people $100 an hour for coaching. And I was like, to be honest with you, dude, like I just finally saved up enough money for discuses. I can't afford that. And then he said, give me your number. And then I gave him my number, and then he did 2 free sessions for me. And then after those 2 sessions, he told me it was going to be our little secret, but he wanted to help me out. So he was going to coach me for free 2 times a week. And I was ecstatic because I grew up, I could never afford to be on a Pee Wee football team. Because, you know, that's expensive. I'm not sure if you played Pee Wee, but it's expensive. It's a lot of money, you know. And
well, I was lucky in the community that I grew up in. I mean, expensive, it's all relative, right? Mm-hmm. But I want to say it was like $50 for the whole season.
Really?
Like you had to buy your own cleats, but like they gave you all the pads you needed and like all these different things. Like you didn't have to buy any of that or the jerseys. So like it was available, right? Like at a young age. Now select, you keep saying select football. I don't even know what that is. Is that like traveling, like AAU football?
I guess it must be like a big Texas thing, but select is like you do Pee Wee, and then select is when the money comes in. So pretty much like a coach will start a team. I may be a little bit wrong on this, but a coach will start a team like somebody's dad, and they'll pretty much recruit other kids. So they'll like be like, okay, say Michael's got a couple of buddies who are good running backs on this team and this team, and they'll pull them all together and they'll pretty much have a team and it'll be a select league.
And they travel to different places.
Yeah, but they'll go to like bigger games like across the state. They'll do tournaments but it's like those, you have to buy your own pads, your own helmets, and you have to get the helmets and the pads that they want you they want you to get. And I mean, dude, it's very easily over $1,000 a season.
Yeah, football was never like that where I grew up. We did have traveling basketball and baseball, and I did those. Sorry, Mom, that was a total waste of money. But you know, back to it though. So this guy sees some potential, and it's a guy that usually charges people $100 an hour to work with him, and he's like, I'll help you out. Like, he gets to a point where he's like, I want to help this dude out. You talked about how inspiring and like that much that pumps you up. Like, there's somebody that's willing to like step up for me in that way. Was it at that point in time though that like you went next level?
I did. Yeah. I went 100%, dude. I would show up an hour before we were supposed to meet, and I would stay for 2 hours after. And our sessions were an hour. I mean, there were some days when my mom and dad would drive up to the ring and start putting my stuff in the car because they knew they weren't going to get me out of the ring. Like, I was so obsessed with it. But the way I saw it was like, if this guy's spending his time to try and develop me, like, I want to make sure I'm getting better, you know? And it wasn't like a pressure thing. It wasn't like, oh, like, I need to do this or else I'm going to get in trouble. It was like, I'm all in on this, you know? Like, I want to get better at this. Like, I had this, at this point, I was very much dialed in on my goal to be a college track star. Like, that was where I wanted to go. Like, without a doubt, was willing to sacrifice, even school. I was willing to sacrifice school to get better at this one thing. Because I was like, if I can prove to myself that I can do this, there's nothing that I'm not going to be able to do. So I just dialed in on that. And when Carlos reached out to help me, like, that was such a big, that was the first big God moment for me, because that just doesn't happen, dude. I mean, a sport like discus, what are the odds that you're going to be out there in a field at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock on a weekday, and there's going to be a former professional discus thrower out there coaching somebody else, and then takes the time to walk over and talk to you? Like, this just doesn't happen. Like, there's no coincidence. I've yet to see anybody out there throwing discus in the last 10 years since me and Brody were out there throwing. You know, it's a God thing for sure.
It's God saying, like, I see you putting in the work. Like, let me
toss you a bone.
Yeah, let me toss you a bone. And we'll definitely get more into the faith side of things too as we progress. But it's interesting in life how that happens. Like, if you say it and you believe it, like you saying, like, I'm gonna go to college for this. Once you start to really believe that, it doesn't matter what anyone else says or thinks. You're gonna do it. Like, if you say it, you believe it, and you're putting in the work. I think that's the sweet spot where, you know, for us it's God, for other people it's a different higher power, the universe. I respect it all, but I think you get rewarded because something somewhere says, like, this person wants it. And so I think I agree with you. I think that was a God moment. Now, high school, like, to finish out high school before we transition into college and some of the other things, did you win some events?
So my freshman year was actually not very great throwing wise. You know, I dealt with a lot of challenges that year too, because I started to feel a lot of imposter syndrome, because the discus goes from a 1 kilo to a 1.6 kilo in high school. So the women's discuses, they stay the same 1 kilo all to pros. But for guys' discuses, it goes from 1 kilo to 1.6. And then when you get to college, it goes to 2 kilos. And the discus gets bigger and bigger. Being a small guy, like, I'd already gotten used to throwing this 1 kilo. Jumping to the 1.6 was a challenge. So I didn't really do a whole lot my freshman year. I did all right in discus, and I had some PRs, but I wasn't varsity level like I wanted to be. You know, so sophomore year comes around, and my coach tells me, he's like, okay, like, I know you want to be on varsity. He's like, throw 138 feet in the first freshman meet, or the first sophomore meet of the season, and we'll put you on varsity. And I go out there and I throw 138 feet on the dot on my third throw. And I was lit, bro. Like, I'd gone probably 2.5 years of not really seeing a whole lot of back giving on my effort I've been putting in. It's just been a lot of doubt, imposter syndrome. Am I wasting time on this? Like, what's going on? And then that one moment was just like, all right, that was that extra bone I needed to keep going forward. So after that, I made varsity, and I was behind Brody at that time because he was a year ahead of me, and he was a much better thrower than I was at that point. And he was winning all these meets. and I was getting second or third right behind him. And it's like, to me, I was okay with that first year on varsity, but it's like part of me was like, fuck, dude, like this guy's like, I know I'm better than him. Like I want to beat this guy, even though he's my teammate and best friend. Like watching him win all of these meets, watching everybody praise him at all these meets, like it pissed me off, and it put a fire in me to want to get better. So I started training harder and harder, and I started watching YouTube videos, reaching out to professionals on Facebook, like Mac Wilkins, Brian Oldfield, all of these guys like that were, I mean, the best of the best, like world record holders, Olympians, like you name it. Like I was trying to get in contact with these guys because I wanted to learn from these guys. So I was taking bits and pieces from everybody I could over the internet. One guy that I reached out to, Judd Logan, who's one of the best, in my opinion, my mentor in the hammer throw. I reached out to him, and he started sending me training programs, strength training programs, all these things that I could be doing to be getting better at throwing. And I just developed. I started pouring into it. And that's when I picked up hammer at the end of my sophomore year. And I started digging into that. And that's when I really started to see growth in the throwing world, because I was good at the shot put. I was pretty good at the discus, but the hammer, I was out the gate incredible with it. And it was badass too. I mean, you have a metal ball on a wire, you spin it around and throw it 3 times and it goes over 100, 150 feet. I mean, that's a pretty good feeling, you know? As a man, being able to throw something and watch it land in the dirt and just explode, like that's just such an awesome feeling. So I dove into that, developed in the hammer. First year was just a learning year. And then second year, I broke 200 feet my junior year. And that's when I kind of started to get recognized by colleges, you know, smaller school, Division II, Division III. And that's when I kind of realized, okay, like this dream of mine is actually kind of becoming a reality. Like, what can we do to get better at this? So one day after school, I went home and I found this database online where you could get a hold of every track and field coach in the country. You could be like, okay, Oregon, and it'll give you the phone numbers to the head coach, throws coach, track coach, whatever. So I made this list of all of these colleges that I wanted to reach out to, and I would look at their program, look who they had. If they had like 5 extremely good hammer throwers, I probably wasn't going to call them, but I still did anyways. And I just went through this list for like an hour or 2 after school every day, and I would call these coaches. I had this email typed out, a template that I would send to them with all of my training stats, my work ethic, what I'm doing, where I want to be, why I would be valued to the program. And I would just send these out to these coaches. And I got barely anything, dude. Like I was getting Division III, Division II responses, but coaches like Oregon or Alabama, some of these bigger schools just weren't paying attention to me because they were only focused on my size. So that was another interesting part of my story, because I was pouring so much time into trying to get recruited and I wasn't getting many bites back. And I don't think I really did get anything back until I broke 220 feet, which that's when coaches really started kind of paying attention. The first one being the coach at UTSA, which he was probably the one that showed the most interest in me. I mean, he drove all the way from San Antonio to have dinner with me and my family and talked with us for hours and then invited me on an official visit. I mean, dude, the whole experience was like D1 football. They don't do that for track guys. So when a coach in track and field does that for you, that's kind of like, wow, like, okay, like I do have something special. Like I'm going to cherish this and I'm going to take it seriously, you know?
So how do you get to Texas?
That was, man, so I remember reaching out to Ty Saban over Facebook, and he told me he couldn't talk to me over Facebook.
For the viewer listener, that's the head coach.
Oh no, he's the throws coach at UT.
Throws coach at UT.
He's not there anymore, but he was the throws coach and the pole vaulting coach. So I reached out to him on Facebook just on a whim. Like I was always hitting up random coaches, just kind of throwing it out there, seeing who was going to bite, you know. And UTSA, LSU, and Texas were the biggest ones that took notice in me. And the Texas coach, Saban, told me to email him. So I emailed him. We went back and forth. And then very quick, he was like, dude, like, I want to invite you on an official visit. And I was like, wow, like I just went on my official visit to UTSA, and I thought that was as best as it was going to get. And then being a kid from Texas, the University of Texas at Austin, it gives me chills thinking about it. Like they want you to come on an official visit because they're interested in bringing you onto the track and field program. I'm like, dude, this is peak of what I talked about I was going to do. I mean, it really, in my opinion, did not get much better than being recruited by the University of Texas for track and field. Like that was not anything anybody around me would have ever imagined I would do. So I went on that visit, drove myself up there, toured the facility. I will say I didn't get nearly as much love as I did at UTSA, but I kind of understood it was a much bigger program. Like I had to earn my wings, you know. But met with Saban. We had a great conversation, met with the head coach, and they offered me books. I mean, which wasn't a whole lot, but pretty much guaranteed admission into the school, and they were going to pay for my books and a few other things in my meal program, which I was like, okay, cool, let's do it. Talked to my parents about it and decided that, you know, Texas was going to be the best option for me, because if I decided track wasn't something I wanted to do later on down the road for whatever reason, at least I was still at a really good school in an awesome city. So Texas, that without a doubt, I called the coach as I was driving home and said, I accept, like I'm going to go to UT. And that was like the start of such a weird journey, because I was on cloud nine, dude. Like, I mean, you know how it feels in high school whenever you get an offer to go to college, like you're going on scholarship. Like, dude, everybody thought that was peak, what's the word? Peak accomplishment for a high school athlete to go to college, Division I, you know? So I was riding an ego train like nobody else, dude. You find me at a party, I was talking about it. I was milking it with girls I was talking to. Like, I was taking advantage of it every step of the way. And a lot of the time, like, I do kind of regret that in a way, but I think that was very crucial in my journey of like learning myself and learning how to be humble. But I was not humble with that at all, dude. Like, I thought I was hot shit after I got that scholarship to UT. And I think that kind of started to dig into my abuse and my partying and my drug addiction, because I kind of felt like this goal I had been working so hard for, I achieved it. So I could chill, I could relax, I could have fun, I could do these things that I wasn't doing for so many years, because now I've finally gotten to that goal. But I think the mistake that I made was I didn't have much of a goal outside of that. Mm-hmm. That was the goal. Get to Texas, get to a university Division I scholarship, get there. And I got there, and I didn't really have much of a game plan after that, other than just to get there and enjoy it and have a good time. And that's what ended up shooting me in the foot.
Yeah, I can relate to that in so many ways. I mean, and not just in that season of my life, in every season of my life, you reach a goal or you get to this pedestal, and once you're there, you're like, okay, I can kick my feet up now, right? I've fallen to that too. I've done the same thing, and you realize you fall quick. Like you're not just like not at that level anymore. Like you're lower than where you started, it feels like at times. So at this point, through high school, just drinking, smoking pot, like normal high school stuff.
Yeah, I started out with pot freshman year, here and there, you know, and I didn't really have an issue with it. You know, it was just something I did at the end of the day. Drinking, that was, you know, everybody starts drinking in high school, at least where I came from. You know, like everybody was either smoking pot, drinking, or doing Xanax. That was Spring, Texas, you know, and for me, I was just a pothead and a drinker. You know, I would smoke a little weed, go train, come home, smoke a little weed, go to bed. That was just what I did, you know, and I think the issue came into the picture after I got accepted to Texas. Like, I was going to a lot more parties, because I was like, I'm the shit, you know, like I got a scholarship, like I'm going to UT. I'm not just going to some D3 school. Like, everybody knows that I'm going to UT for track, and everybody knows how hard I worked to get there. So like I had a lot of attention, you know, and I'm not trying to be cocky about that. It's just, I was soaking all of that in. So I'd go to a party and I'd get hammered drunk, and I would do something. I'd lash out. One night, I remember we were having like a kickback at one of our friends' houses because their parents were out of town, and I took like 3 Xanax and a bunch of shots of tequila, and ended up getting naked and dancing on the counter, and then sprinting out the front door, and everybody ended up chasing me around the neighborhood for like 4 hours trying to get me back to the house. And that was just one of many nights where I did stuff like that. But I didn't think that there were any issues with that, because I was who I was. You know, I could get away with it because I had already accomplished it. You know, it's just a delusional mindset. Like, you know the feeling. Like, I had already accomplished what I said I was going to do, so it's okay if I can go out and do these things and act out. Yep. You know, and by hearing you say that and from the stories you told me, I know you know exactly how that feels.
Yeah, it's delusional, but it's also like it's a way to like convince yourself that you're better than everybody else, right? It's an ego thing.
100%.
And for me, it was like very similar. It's like, well, if I can still get fucked up like this and drink, this is in high school, and act a fool and get in trouble. And, there was a couple different times like the cops were involved. I always got lucky somehow. My buddies didn't. And this is in high school. And my mom would be like, dude, what are you doing? I'm like, clearly it doesn't, like, I'm good. Like, I'm going to Kent State. I'm fine. Like, I'm going to graduate high school. I've earned it. Like, I can do what I want to do, and I can still show up and be good at what I'm good at. And so that delusion for me, and that would carry much later in my life, professionally even. In the construction business, our team was always really successful, but I was partying my ass off. So I was like, well, what does it matter if I party my ass off? Like, no one else is putting these numbers in. And so it was like another way that I wasn't willing to face, like, kind of what I was doing or what I was going through. So in a similar fashion, for me, no hard drugs in high school. I didn't even have like my first Adderall till college. And that for me was like, holy shit. Like, this is the best. At that time, it was the best thing I'd ever done.
Limitless pill.
Yeah, that's what it felt like.
And literally, I literally saw that movie like a year before my first Adderall too, which I started taking that like at the end of junior year. That's when the hard drug thing started for me, and then senior year was just nothing off the table. I was willing to do anything, but it didn't really get to like a real big problem until college. But the Adderall, yeah, dude, that was a big one. I took that for the first time when I was a busser in the restaurant industry, and I was always getting flustered because I was like all these things I had to do, and I didn't have enough energy to do it. And one of the guys that worked there, the owner's son, Joel, not gonna say his last name, but he gave me one. And dude, I was like, is this how we're supposed to be feeling all the time? Because I don't feel like this all the time. So I thought, I was like, wow, like this is that thing I've been missing. This is that thing that's gonna allow me to do better in school, to have more energy in the day, to kill it at work. Like, I was like, holy crap, how did I not know about this stuff? So I immediately started to try and get prescribed to it, and it didn't take long at all.
It's baffling, and I love these conversations because this comes up every time for me when we're having these conversations. For me, in my opinion, I'm not a doctor. Nowhere close. Barely got a bachelor's. But what I'll say about addiction is this, in my experience. The things that are legal, I believe, drive the most addiction to like the darker street drugs. So you think about alcohol. It's legal to buy in the United States, like as long as, depending on the state, like your age, whatever, but you can get it. And it's widely accepted. Well, alcohol, for me, was the gateway drug. Any drug I ever tried or did stemmed from alcohol. Then you think about Adderall. Adderall is prescribed from a doctor to people to help them. Well, what does Adderall lead to? Right?
Crystal meth for a lot of people.
Okay, so that's one or two. Then you talk about like opiates, injuries, and especially within athletics, super common. Tear a labrum, blow a knee, blow a hip, whatever it is. The first thing they do is make that type of treatment accessible to you. You get an opiate. What do opiates lead to?
A lot of people, heroin.
Heroin, right? So like, it's funny that all these things stem from things that are legal or available, right? And that's my issue with like the current like social standard around all this. The people that I feel like want to condemn addiction the most sign off on all the things that are creating it in a lot of ways. Now, do I believe like mental, emotional health plays a massive role in all this? Absolutely. I would never discount that. But to sit here and act like we're not contributing to this problem as a society by prescribing Adderall, not responsibly prescribing opiates, advertising and promoting booze left and right. Like, we're not helping the situation. And that leads into the conversation around marijuana. I get into it with people about this all the time. So like there's a ton of different conversations around it. But I've certainly smoked pot before. I've never once smoked a bowl, hit a bong, smoked a joint, smoked a blunt, and been like, man, I want to try something harder, right? Like that's never the feeling I've had after getting high. It's always, for me, it was paranoia or hunger, but like it wasn't the gateway drug, and that's all that was taught to me growing up. It's like, don't smoke pot. It's the gateway drug. It's the devil's lettuce. You know what I mean? Meanwhile, like they're over here drinking, and that's normalized. And to me, that's always led to more problems. I'm not saying pot's the greatest thing. I'm not promoting marijuana. What I'm saying is we're focused on the wrong things sometimes as a society, and that's what frustrates me. So it can make sense. Like it makes sense to me that it started around Adderall. It makes total sense to me. Do you remember your first time taking that step from Adderall to the harder side of Adderall, like from the amphetamine to the methamphetamine?
Like when I started abusing it, or when I started resorting to heavier options?
Do you remember the first time you ever tried it?
Oh yeah, that was when I was a busser at that restaurant. I didn't really know anything about it. Like I was just mentioning that I couldn't focus and I was brain fogged. And one of the guys I worked with, Joel, he was like, "Hey, well, this is for people with ADHD. You might have ADHD, so just give it a shot, see if it helps."
Oh, I know the Adderall. I'm
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about the first time that it wasn't Adderall.
That it wasn't Adderall?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that was freshman year of college, because that was when I was partying pretty hard. I was going down to 6th Street a lot. And, you know, in Austin, it's weird being in a college town like Austin, because when you go down to like 6th Street, you don't just get college students. It's not a college bar district. I mean, it's a huge city. You get tech guys, you get millionaires, you get people who work in the restaurant. I mean, you get everybody from all walks of life. So you're not just meeting college kids. And I got in with a crowd of people who loved to party. They loved the fact that I was a guy that was on the track team at UT, but I still loved to have a good time. I mean, these guys, I mean, we were doing coke, we were sharing Adderall scripts, passing stuff around, Xanax here and there. And a couple of the guys in the group were smoking crystal meth. Some of them were eating it, some were smoking it. And I didn't really pay much attention to it in the first few months, but it became an issue when I couldn't get Adderall anymore. I couldn't, like my scripts, I was cleaning them out in a week. And I had a Vyvanse script and an Adderall script and another Adderall script that I was getting from my doctor in Houston. So I was getting 2 scripts from the doctor at Texas and then 1 from the doctor in Houston. I was cleaning through that in a week, sometimes a week and a half. So when I couldn't find somebody to buy it from, I was starting to think I would get anxious, I would get paranoid, like I would start to get the withdrawals from it. And the withdrawals from amphetamines, it's like anxiety on a level times 50. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. It's just the uncomfortable feeling of wanting to crawl out of your skin. So I eventually was like, hey, like y'all always say this is like Adderall. It's like, is it possible I could take just a little bit and it'll be similar? And they're like, yeah, like, well, fuck it, let's do it. So I started taking that and I started eating it at first. And it's the tiniest little piece was like 5 Adderalls in one. And it was 10 times cheaper. So for me, I was like, okay, well, this is, I mean, so many other people are doing it. Like these guys all have jobs. Like they weren't college students. They were like in their mid-20s, you know, working in restaurants. Some were working in tech. And these guys were just using this on the day-to-day basis. And I thought, well, if these guys can do this and hold down jobs, I was like, then it shouldn't be a problem for me. Well, I was already extremely deep into my addiction. And I didn't even realize it. I thought that I was just doing everything I could to keep up with the student-athlete lifestyle because I wanted to party, I wanted to study, and I wanted to train hard. And I was doing all of that, but on 2 to 3 hours of sleep. And I think it was manageable for a little bit because I was still showing up. I was showing up 5-10 minutes late, but I was still showing up to practice and classes and showing up to party. I was still doing everything. But after 4 or 5 months of doing this, I started to really feel the effects of it. I was gaining weight. I wasn't shaving. Like I just had a beard. My hair, I was not getting haircuts. I had hair growing down the back of my neck. There were some days I wouldn't shower or brush my teeth. Some days I wouldn't eat. And then when I would come down from the crash, I would eat so much food that I would gain weight. And then I would go 5 days without eating again. And then 3 days of eating a ton and sleep. It's just, you start to realize like, okay, like maybe I've got a problem, you know? And I would lash out. I would get in arguments with people over the dumbest stuff. Like I would get mad at people for looking at me in public wrong. And I didn't know what was going on. I didn't understand what addiction was. Like in my mind, I was like, okay, I was taking Adderall. This is a drug prescribed to my doctor. This can't be the problem. All right. I resort to crystal meth. I was like, okay, well, this isn't the problem because it's pretty much the same thing as Adderall because of the chemical. I was justifying it in so many ways every single corner I turned. So for me, I think that big turning point was probably about beginning in November when I started taking it, and I was hooked immediately. I did not give a shit about finding Adderall. I could not justify paying $200 for somebody's script when I could go get a dime bag of crystal for 25, $30. And that lasted me almost twice as long. So I dug into that, and the staying up for 2 to 3, 4 days started happening at that point. The shadow people started showing up, which was not something I did a little bit with the Adderall. I'd see a little things here and there, but the crystal, that was very, very, very vivid. Like 10 out of 10 swore I was seeing people walking into my dorm room. There were some days when I would get so high in my car in the parking lot or the parking garage across from the dorms that I would be in there for 3 days at a time. And by this point, I wasn't going to classes. I was still going to practices, but I was very, very much on a very, very thin sheet of ice. Like the coaches knew what was going on. They didn't know that I was on amphetamines because I was prescribed to this. So when they drug test me, the only thing that would come up would be weed or coke here and there. So they didn't know that I had a problem with amphetamines. They thought I was just a pothead, you know, and my coach would try and tell me, like, dude, like, just, like, we'll help you get off of it. But, like, it's not a very hard thing to quit. Like, I've seen people quit alcohol. I've seen people quit nicotine. Like, pot is not that big a deal. And I never had the heart to tell them that it was the amphetamines. Like, I was doing much, much harder stuff. And I think that's kind of where a lot of my issues stem from, is I was holding this in. Like, I wasn't telling anybody that I was struggling with this, you know, except for my parents. Like, my mom and dad knew what was going on. I think they just didn't want to accept it to the point to where they had to come get me because I was the first in my family to get a college scholarship somewhere. And I think it was really hard for them to wrap their head around that I was going downhill fast, really fast.
Yeah. You think that sometimes you wonder if their thought process was kind of like, okay, eventually, hopefully he'll figure it out and we won't have to do that.
Yeah, I think that they even said that too, you know. I think my dad knew what was going on, but having struggled with addiction in his own life, I think he knew, like, we're the same person in a lot of ways. He knew that he wasn't going to get me to change. It was something I had to come to terms with on my own. And my mom, she knew I was stubborn. She knew, like, if she said anything to me during that time period, I was going to lash out. I was going to get pissed. I didn't want to hear it from nobody, dude. Like, I had it. I had everything under control. I had accomplished what I said I was going to accomplish. Like, trust me, like, I'm driving this ship, you know? I was not driving the ship.
Yeah. You were on the ride for sure, though. Did you remember, like, specifically, because we could sit here and talk about, like, those war stories all day.
All day.
But do you remember specifically, and I like to ask people that come on this question, your rock bottom, like your bottom? Do you remember what it was, what it felt like?
Yeah, man. It was like a 2-week period when this happened right before the winter break, first semester freshman year. I was very much off the team at this point, but it just wasn't official. Like, I was clearly, like, screwing the whole opportunity. So one night I went on a bender. You know, I'd been crashing for 3 days, getting myself back on track, eating, hydrating. Then I'd go on another bender, and I started in my car in the parking garage. And I would just listen to music. I'd do stuff on my computer. Like, I blacked out for most of the time when I would do that stuff. But for me, I was just soaring. I was taking way too much. I was eating it like candy. It seemed like every 20, 35 minutes, I was dipping my pinky in and taking a little more. I'd put a little bit in a bowl, or I'd smoke it or whatever. And the time was going by so fast. It almost felt like I blinked. And it was 2 days later. I blinked, and it was another 2 days gone. And I was up for about 5 to 6 days at this point. And then I realized my car had died because I ran out of gas. So I was like, all right, I need to go back to my dorm. So I took the walk back to my dorm. It was like 30 degrees out. I hadn't eaten, barely drank anything. Like, I thought I was going to die from hypothermia walking back to my dorm room. And I get back to my dorm. I realized I still had a script of Vyvanse that I just picked up the week before. And it was like, I want to say 20, 70 milligram pills. And I was already coming off of, like, being up for 6 days. Like, I was already feeling very, very shitty in my head. So when I got back to my dorm, I was like, I'm off the team, very likely. My roommate moved to a different dorm. All the relationships that I built, you know the process. You're coming down, you're flipping through the checklist of all the things that were going wrong. So for me, I was like I can't do this anymore. So I just said, you know what, I'm about to crash. I'm just going to swallow this whole bottle and see what happens. So I swallowed the whole bottle of pills, and I blacked out on my bed. And I remember waking up 2 hours later, and I got a notification on my phone that my Uber was outside. And I was like, I didn't fucking call an Uber. So I walk outside, and I told him, like, I didn't call an Uber. He's like, are you sure? He's like, for Matt Ritchey. I was like, yeah. I was like, that's me. And then he was like, okay. He was like, well, it said you're trying to go to the urgent care down the street. Like, are you okay? Like, are you sick? I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. So I hopped in the Uber. He drove me to the urgent care, and I called my mom, and I told her what was going on. And I was, at this point, I was like, okay, like I'd been up for 7 days. Like I felt like shit. Like I was dehydrated. I was starving. My brain was rattling. I thought I was dying. I genuinely thought I was dying. So he dropped me off at the urgent care. I walk inside, and I didn't have a whole lot of energy. I didn't have much words to say. I didn't have anything in me, dude. I was just hollow. And I told him, I said, hey, like I don't know why I got an Uber here. It's like, but I feel like I need to be here. Like I'm not okay. Like I'm dying. Like I don't feel good. And they had me fill out all this stuff. They brought me into a room, and they put me on what's it called? They put me on an IV. They were trying to get fluids into my system, but they couldn't find my veins because I was so dehydrated. So I remember when they tried to put the IV in my arm, they hit my bone, and I just remember blacking out because the pain was so unbearable. I just couldn't take it. So they ended up getting fluid into my system and food into my system, a little bit of food. And then they ended up telling me that I needed to call my parents and let them know what was going on. So my parents knew what was going on, but they didn't know I was staying up for 6-7 days at a time. They didn't know that I was very close to either overdosing or trying to kill myself. So called my parents. I told them. They immediately got in the car and drove up to Austin from Houston, 2.5 hours. And I just remember they put me on benzos to help me sleep, to get some rest. And I just remember waking up and looking down the hall, and I see my parents walking in the room, and my dad and my mom just started crying. And that was, for me, when I finally realized, like, I wasn't just hurting myself, I was hurting the people around me.
Yeah.
You know, and sorry.
You're good.
That was definitely rock bottom for me right there. That was when I realized, like, this little game I was playing, you know, get high, have fun, see what fucking happens at the end of the day, see what happens at the end of the week, the month. Like, let's just ride this ship until it crashes. You know, that's when that kind of finally leveled out, and I was like, all right, like this is a problem. This is not okay. So we went back to my dorm, packed up everything, and my parents pretty much said, like, it's time to come home. You know, we gotta get this under control. Like, you cannot stay here by yourself doing this on your own, because you're either going to end up in jail, dead, or worse, killing yourself. So they were understanding about it. My parents were never like, what's wrong with you? Like, they were never like that. My parents were the most understanding of this situation. It's almost crazy to think about how many times they just looked at me and just gave me a hug and said, hey, like, whatever you need, we're here for you. Like, we're going to help you get through this. We get it, you know? And that kind of gave me that understanding in my heart that, like, I'm not perfect. Like, I'm never gonna be. Like, this situation sucks, but it's not the end of the world, you know? And
can I ask you a question about that relationship and what it looked like and what could have happened? And this is based on my own experience, and I'm wondering if there's similarities here. So you mentioned you have an older and a younger sibling.
Mm-hmm.
Did your parents, like, needing to come get you and put, like, their efforts and emphasis into you to help you, do you think that ever created envy or resentment amongst your siblings towards you? Or do you think it was, like, all mutual, like it was good?
That's so crazy you mentioned that. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that, honestly. But yeah, definitely. I didn't even notice that until, like, a couple years ago. My little brother told me, we were having a conversation about all of this stuff in the past, you know, and I was telling him how proud I was. You know, he was about to graduate from A&M with honors. Like, he was getting job offers. Like, he was crushing it. And we go to family events, and he's getting all the attention. Everybody wants to know what Mark's doing. And like, I was happy for him. I was so proud of him. But I told him, I was like, it was weird for me because I'm used to being the one that gets all the attention at family gatherings, or everybody's always chatting with me on Facebook, like, wow, we're so proud of you, all this stuff. So to watch him be in that position, I was like, it was just awesome. I was proud of him. And then that's when he told me, he was like, well, Matthew, like, I don't know if you realize it, but for years, like, I was watching you get all the attention. Like, nobody cared about what me and Michael were doing. And that's not saying nobody did, but I was always the center of attention. I thrived on that. And I think that was the first time I realized, like, how much love and support I stole from my brothers in that time period, because my parents were pouring so much energy into me and helping me get myself on track that they weren't accolading Michael and Mark. They weren't going up to them, visiting them in their college towns, or, you know, like sharing their accomplishments on Facebook. They weren't getting that attention. You know, that was always for me, because I was the one who was always having stuff going on. It was just, my parents were very focused on trying to keep me from losing myself, because they were afraid that I was going to be too far gone.
Yeah. No, it makes total sense to me, man. I think about that often in my own life. And, you know, I have an older sibling, an older brother. He's, depending on the time of year, 12 or 13 years older than me. So for all intents and purposes, a different generation. But I wonder, like, how much my actions impacted our relationship. And, you know, he's a great man, great father, great husband. Like, there's nothing there for me resentment-wise towards him. Like, how could there be, right? If anything, I was getting all the attention and support. And I think it's interesting when you have those thoughts. So I always like to ask that question, like, if you've ever felt that, or that concern, or like that feeling of like, dang, like, I might have been part of the reason that relationship isn't what it could be. So that's hard for me to think about too.
You know, I thought about this a lot over the last few years, you know, like, especially, you know, being in such a good place. You know, Christmas is so enjoyable, like, seeing family, it's always such a good time. Like, we get together, we laugh, we all sit around at the table, have a good time. And then I think about all those years where I was out of it. You know, like Christmas morning, like, I'd been up all night on something the night before, and, you know, I would try to hide it, but it's very clear, like, the energy in the room, like, you could feel, like, when one person in the family's off, the whole family's off. You know, dad not in a good mood, mom stressed because she wants a great Christmas, wants everybody to be happy, but that's not the case. Michael, older brother, pissed at me for, you know, fucking off so many great opportunities when he didn't get to go to Texas, or didn't get as many things that I got over the years, you know. And Mark just wanted me happy, you know, and I'm trying so hard to make everybody not see what's going on that it was very clear. Like, I wasn't hiding shit, bro. It was very obvious. I know you know this because you told me stories about holidays too. Holidays always hit the worst during those periods, because it's like,
well, still for me, if I'm being real.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
still
right there with you on some holidays, man. It's
Christmas.
Those memories always come back
every year. I mean, Christmas for me, I've spent probably the last 3 or 4 Christmases in Texas, and my mom's come down for a couple of those, which I love, but like, I don't go home much, and it's because for me, there needs to be purpose for me to go back, and like, that's coming up for me next week. Like, there's purpose there, but you know, that hasn't existed for a long time, because for me, going back home looked a lot like getting on an airplane, depending on where I was at in the country, getting absolutely hammered in the airport though, getting on the plane, flying into home, immediately landing, trying to find drugs, and then being up for a day or 2 days, and then showing up to my mom's house at 6 a.m. on Christmas morning, and just like having to look at her and like that, and it's self-created. Like, I created that feeling, but that, knowing now in a similar conversation to you, like, the amount of hurt that must have projected onto her when all she was trying to do was be a good mom.
She just think about my mom, bro. Mama Ritchey, she just wants us to be happy. You know, her and my dad always said that. Oh, I hate getting emotional, but you know,
it's good for you.
She just wants us to be happy, man. And I wasn't happy for such a long period of time. I just kind of thought that was the norm. And you get so used to, I know you can relate to this, you get so used to showing up in that state that you think you're hiding it. You think that You know, like, oh, I'm having a good day. Like, nobody's going to see me feeling this way or in this state if I just don't talk about it or if I try to act like I'm fine. But dude, it's just something about being in that persona, in that state where it's like, you can't hide it. You can't hide that feeling. You could try all you want, but
Mama
dude,
always knows.
Mama always knows.
She always knows, bro. I've had these conversations with her, and you know, she told me eventually, you know, after I'd been sober for a while, she kind of said, she's like, I always knew when something was up because your communication pattern shifted so drastically. And that was me. Like if I was up for a couple days doing dope, drinking, whatever, I wasn't talking to my mom. And then the sad part about that is like when I would come down off of it and like try to get my life back together for a few days for work or whatever the reason was, she was the first person that I would punish like verbally, right? If she reached out or like tried to question like, hey, are you all right? You've been getting into some stuff. And I would react to that in such a shitty way and be like, yeah, that's your problem. You always wanted like, you know, and basically just like tear her apart verbally. But it was just me reacting to getting defensive to being called out on the truth. You know, and she wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to have a conversation with me to understand how she could help. But in that moment, in that time, I just thought it was judgment. And I was like, no, I can't have this. Like, I have to react poorly.
That's wild you mentioned that. I don't think we've ever talked about that, dude, but I was just about to say that as well. Like, my mom, like, it kills me still thinking about it, but, like, she would give me this look. I know you know the look. Mm-hmm. She'd look into your eyes, and it's a very observing but worried look, and it would piss me off, dude. It's like, because I knew in that moment when she gave me that look, she knew. Like, it didn't matter how well I hide it or how well I was trying to act like I was okay. Like, she knew. And I'd be like, why are you looking at me like that? Like I'm fine. Like, why are you looking at me like that? Quit looking at me like that. And she'd be like, I'm not looking at you like anything. Mm-hmm. And then just boom, 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 ultimate reaction. And it's just all the time, all the time. And all she really wanted was for me to just be happy or try to figure out what she could do to help me. And I can't even imagine what that feeling is like as a mother. Like I'll never know what that feeling's like. Yeah. But I can't imagine what that feeling is like as a mother to look at your child hurting so bad and know that there's not a damn thing you can do about it other than just hope and pray that they make it through it. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. And that was a big part of my turning point too. Outside of, and I've shared it with you, and I think I talked a little bit about it on the first episode, this moment before midnight on my birthday and looking in the mirror and being disgusted with myself, and then also, you know, from the faith side, telling God, like, I'm ready if you're ready. All that happened. But I think the most pain that I felt during all that, which is like crazy to think about now, was like, I knew I was hurting my mom. I knew it. Like, and I knew it was destroying her, and I knew she was worried sick. And like, to imagine now that I had the clarity to think about it and talk about it, the worry or the concern that she must have carried around with her 24/7, like I can't even fathom that. I can't even put it together in my head. And I don't think I got it until a couple years in. And she said something one day, like something to the effect of, I don't worry about the phone ringing in the middle of the night anymore. Because it would, you know, Trip's in jail. You know, I got arrested 4 different times, all drinking related. Should have been a lot more than that. But like, she was always my first call. It's the only number I've ever memorized is my mom's cell phone number. I don't know, still to this day. I think I know my grandmother's home phone and my mom's cell phone and my pop's stepdad, his cell phone. But when I was in trouble, it was always her. And what's crazy for me to think back on all those times is like, that's no life for your mom. You know what I mean? To live in a constant state of worry or concern. And I'm glad it doesn't have to be that way anymore. But I'd be lying if I said it doesn't bother me a little bit still to this day that I put her through that. So, yeah, I think that the family dynamics of all this is really interesting to get into. And not a lot of people talk about like how their actions impact the entire family.
Oh, man, dude. I mean, I felt my actions ripple across not just my immediate family, but like my grandparents, my cousins, you know, like my cousin Wilson. Dude, I still beat myself up to this day, and I think about it all the time. But we had my graduation party. We're both the same age, and we went to different high schools, but we had our graduation party separate. Everybody came to mind. He came to mind. Like, everybody showed up. It was an awesome time. Like, everybody celebrated me going to Texas, graduating, and then come his graduation party. I remember I was hanging out with my friend Jenna, and we were smoking pot and parked in a cul-de-sac in her neighborhood, and we took like 4 Xanax each. And then I remember, only thing I remember, or 2 things I remember. One, I remember going into the smoke shop the next morning at like 7 a.m. and walking in and then walking right out with a bong. And didn't even, like, the guy wasn't in the front. I just walked in, I saw it. I said, well, this is easy. Let's just walk out with it. And then I remember she dropped me off at the house that morning, like an hour later, and I tried to hide the bong. So I walked in the front door and I put it right behind the couch in the middle of the hallway, thinking that nobody was going to see it. And now, remind you, this 10 a.m. was my cousin's graduation party we were going to. And I go straight to my room and I pass out. And my family knew, like, I guess my mom or dad saw me walk in, and it's very clear that I was fucked up. So they didn't even try waking me up to get me to go to his party. I remember waking up at like 7 p.m. that day thinking like, oh my gosh, like, did I miss his party? And they're like, yeah, you did. And he wouldn't text me about it. Like, I tried to apologize, and I don't even think we talked for like 3 years after that. Not like intentionally. It was just, that just kind of dissipated that relationship, at least how I felt from my perspective. I just felt wrong for it. You know, I felt like I knew I had that thing to go to the next day. He was my cousin, you know, like, we'd had a great relationship growing up, and to just so carelessly just do one decision for myself and end up missing something big. Like, I really felt that. And there were things that happened like that all across the board with other cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents. It's just, you start doing these things over and over and over and over again, and then you start affirming what everybody's saying about you. You know, you start to confirm that you are the person that everybody's saying you are. You are doing the things that everybody say would happen. Like, I remember so many people, primarily senior year, were making jokes like, oh, like, Ritchey's going to get to Austin, he's going to fuck it all up.
Yeah. And
I don't know if that jinxed me or what, but I remember having that in the back of my head when I walked into rehab, and I'm like, dude, that 1 hour drive to rehab with my parents in 2017, that was all in my head. Track team was on a flight headed to Big 12 championships, and I was in a car heading to rehab.
Yeah.
And I just could not get it out of my head how right everybody was about me. And I was marinating in that for like the first week. That's all I could think about was like, holy shit, how did I go from proving everybody wrong to proving everybody right in 6 months? I still to this day just have a hard time wrapping my head around how fast everything just crumbled.
Yeah, I can relate to every piece of that. For me, the 2 things that led to that fall, if you will, was my ego, and I was selfish. Like, every decision that I made was for me. You know, and it was so that I could feel better, or I could do what I wanted, or I could feel loved, or the support, or the attention. And when I look back at it, that's what it was. Nothing was out of service for anyone else. And it's so ironic, right? When you become selfless in your journey and want to help others, it doesn't always, like, the instant gratification isn't always there, right? In the same sense as when you're selfish. But what's crazy about it is, like, when you're selfish, the prolonged satisfaction really never happens. Or prolonged gratification never happens. But if you invest in other people and you become selfless, that prolonged satisfaction does exist. It pops up randomly, and it's honestly when you need it sometimes. So we never knew each other pre-sobriety, right? We hadn't overlapped. We kind of both met post-sobriety.
Good thing for that.
Yeah.
Dude. Shit.
Yeah, that's a blessing for sure.
That would have been a dynamic combo.
Yeah. Well, no, I've thought about that. You know what I mean? I've thought about that. We're not all that different. And what's interesting too, to me, for us, is like how that even came up, right? Like how it came up that, like, oh, like for me, it was like, I used to drink and do coke all the time, and you telling your story about drinking and methamphetamines or benzos, whatever the case may be. It's so funny though, like how much we actually connected over that, and we don't talk about it to this day, right? Like that was our connection. We both shared that experience, but the things we connect over today are so much deeper than that. I feel like there's a level of brotherhood that certainly exists. There's the endurance world, like we've both played in. You much more successfully than I'll state.
I wouldn't say that.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, like, I've always admired it. You know what I mean? And what's interesting about all these things for me too, without diving into a crazy amount of like your accomplishments, I do think it's important to highlight for the viewer and listener, like how you can go from in a car to rehab while your teammates are on a flight to the Big 12 championships to completing Ironmans, completing half Ironmans, completing marathons, all these different things. Like, I think it's important to highlight it because you can make that transition. You can make that shift. And that's what's interesting to me. The same thing that made you great as a thrower, made you great as an addict, made you great as an endurance athlete. And these are all chapters, right? And we each write these chapters. And I think it's important now. I want to talk about like what chapter you're in now, because I don't think the chapter you're in now is any of those three things specifically. And I think it's important for the people that go through this process to understand that these chapters change, these identities change, and it's okay when they shift or they change to feel like an immense amount of pressure or stress or emotion or fear because it's new, it's different. So I want to talk a little bit about like what season you're in right now. Like what are you focused on right now?
Well, I just started a job freight brokering about 3 months ago, and it's definitely an interesting season for sure. I'm in the office like 11, sometimes 12 hours a day. I'm not training 20, 25 hours a week like I was for so many years, you know, and I think that's a big shift for me, you know, because like so much of my identity has fallen in athletics for so long. So I've told myself, you know, I sacrificed a lot in those years I did triathlons, and last year, you know, getting into content creation, whatever you want to call it, I sacrificed a lot. I put school aside for a lot of things. I wasn't working or focused on my finances as much as I was focused on these. I was pouring everything into it, from recovery, training, eating, putting things off so I could focus on this training session or getting better. Like I was so all in on this. And I realized about a year ago that what I was doing, like, yeah, it was fun. Like I was enjoying it. I was growing physically and mentally in a lot of ways. I wasn't growing myself in a career. You know, I wasn't doing something that was going to provide family or provide value to a family later down the road or put me in a position to be financially free, which is primarily a big goal in life for me, is to be financially free so I can do the things I want to do. So I realized that. So I was like, okay, like, what if I poured all the energy? Actually, my chiropractor told me this one time because I was complaining or talking about how stressed I was. Like I wasn't feeling like I was doing anything worthwhile aside from triathlons or running. And he said, well, what if you poured all that energy you're pouring into training into a career? And I did not want to hear that, but I'm glad I did because it definitely kind of sparked some thoughts. So I started applying to places, looking around, and ended up getting a job at Arrive as a freight broker. And I was like, okay, well, this is a job where there's no cap salary or commission. Like you could make as much as you put in. So I was like, all right, like I'm going to put this training, full endurance athlete profile on the back burner for a little bit while I get myself started in this career. And I've been all in on it. And it's so weird for me, dude, because I could run all day long. I could do things physically all day long. But mentally, that's a new challenge.
Yeah.
Mental endurance, you know, like this job, like my mentor, we were talking about it the other day, and I was trying to tell him, I was telling my buddies like how hard this job is. And he said, I wouldn't even bother. Like you can't explain to somebody how difficult it is working at that company. And I'm not trying to belittle anybody else's job. I think everybody's job's difficult in a lot of ways, but the mental endurance it takes. I mean, to give you an example, we've got 4 screens in front of us. We've got 5 chats from Telegram, WhatsApp, GChat, text message, whatever way we like to communicate with these carriers. And then you have a Gmail open, a Slack open, you have a tracking board, which I can't even begin to explain all that stuff, but there's just so many different, you have to multitask like 5 different things at once. And not only that, but you have to do it well. You know, like you can't be slow, you can't be sluggish, you can't, because you'll click on the wrong stuff or you'll mess something up or book the wrong load or put the wrong truck number in for a load, and that truck will go halfway across the country when he's supposed to be in Oregon.
Yeah.
So it's like all these different things. There's not a whole lot of room for mistakes. I mean, you're going to make mistakes, but there's not a whole lot of room. So for me, I don't have that mental endurance yet. You know, being in front of a computer for 11, 12 hours a day, like that's not something I've been accustomed to ever in my life. So I've been kind of struggling with that, you know, like in a decent way, in a healthy way, you know, like I'm trying to get better at this job. I'm trying to grow with this, and I've had to put some things on the back burner. You know, I can't go run a half marathon before work every day. Otherwise, I'm going to be dead by 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
You know, I can't do 2-a-days every single day. Otherwise, I'm not going to have the energy or the time to make food to fuel myself for the next day. I mean, there's so many different things that I've gotten so accustomed with the routine of endurance training or the athlete lifestyle. Like I can run circles around that all day long. Like I know how that world works. I can do it. But the corporate world, the brokering world, the 90 to nothing all day long for 12 hours straight, eating lunch at your desk, like that world is not something I'm used to. And it's just provided a whole new challenge for me. I got so comfortable with endurance training that I could handle a bad day.
Yeah.
You know, I could handle having a bad training session. I learned to understand what came with the cost of doing that. But I'm running into problems in this new chapter that reminds me just how much I don't have it figured out.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we were just talking about that in the sauna. It's like, just when you feel like you've got it all, it's like, man, dude, like a month ago, I was like, dude, I've got this. Like, I understand how life works. Like, and I was like, I don't ever just say that unless I truly feel like it's true. And I just get humbled every single time, dude.
Absolutely. Hello and welcome to the Ain't Dead Yet podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Dash Hydrate. Dash Hydrate is a premium hydration supplement. I use it personally. I have friends that use it. I know people within the construction industry that use it. I know weekend warriors that use it. It's a wonderful product. It helps with rapid hydration. It's effective. I believe in not just the product, but the people behind the product. Go on to www.dashhydrate.com and make sure you use code Ain't Dead Yet to get you 10% off. Let's go. Enjoy the episode. We had to take a little bit of a break. I'm going to be honest. We did a sauna cold plunge session before we started today, and I think I drank like a gallon of water in the sauna and had a cold brew. And to keep it real and keep it 100 with everybody, I had to go pee.
Yeah, you were over there fidgeting, dude. I was wondering if we were hitting the wrong subject or something.
I was like over here going like this. And so, yeah, no, we're back. And to dive right back in, man, so you're in this new season of life, and it's this corporate job, and it's so much different than waking up with your primary focus every day being like, okay, I got to run 10 miles. I got to go get on the bike. I need to go swim. I need to weight train. Oh, crap, I got to recover. Oh, crap, I got to eat. To you've got to show up to the same location every day, knowing what's coming at you and be able to perform at a certain level all day long. My question to you around that new season or that change is like, has there been days where the thought has crossed your mind, like I know how to do something to make myself better at this? And I mean that from a vulnerable place, because I've had those thoughts before where it's like I have to go, like an emergency happens, and it could be something small, but like I need to drive back to Virginia for something. Well, I know if I take a couple Adderall, that drive is no problem, right? I don't do it because I know what it does to me, but I was wondering if that's ever crossed your mind as you've gotten into this new season of like, does that ever cross your mind as an option?
100%, dude. Honestly, every other day it crosses my mind. You know, this office is so different from other places, you know, because probably not going to touch base on that a whole lot.
Yeah.
Maybe we could cut that out just for things. I don't want to like that coming back to bite me in the ass.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll cut that out. But at least the part where I say what company it is.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, no, I mean, it definitely crosses my mind a lot, dude. Same reason why I abused it when I got to Texas. It was a lot. It was a lot of navigating stuff that I didn't have the energy or the mental capacity for. And I knew that there was one thing I could do to push me a little forward. But the problem was that which I learned early on at a young age, was that help only lasts a couple days. You know, it gets to a point to where it's not helping you anymore. You're just doing everything you can to keep yourself on edge, you know? And I know you know that feeling, you know, it's like the anxiety or the inability to speak or the inability to eat or get rest or to feel comfortable in your skin. Like that comes after just a couple days of doing that stuff, you know? And there's definitely been some days when I feel like that might help me, you know, especially in a brokering environment, you know, drugs, I guarantee you people are doing it all over the place.
Yeah.
You know, and for me, like I don't have that option, you know, and that bothers me sometimes because when there's days when I'm moving slow, I don't have the energy. Especially in the last week with my Nana going on hospice, you know, like my brain just didn't want to work. Like I didn't want to zone out and just focus on work. Like I just didn't have the capacity for it. Like my brain just kept going to other places. Aside from some other things going on in my life right now, it's very, very, very hard to show up in a work environment when you're expected to work 100% of the time at 100% speed. You know, like it's not just, let me just click on this email and see what this person wants. No, it's like I'm calling a carrier while I'm answering an email about a truck that needs a detention request. Or you're doing all these things and you're doing it fast. And it doesn't matter how fast you do it, you got to keep going faster. That's like the name of the job is you get better every day, but every day you get better, you have to get faster the next day. You know, you have to click on this email faster, enter this truck into a load match faster, you know, like update truck entries so that way you can get matches faster, you know, calling on carriers the second you get a match in an email and then calling another one when you get more matches. It's just, you can't do the job fast enough. Even the people who are the best at this job still aren't fast enough. And it's just, that's a weird feeling for me, you know, because I hold myself to a high standard. You know, I want to be the best at everything I do. I want to be 100% every day. I want to feel good every day. Like that's something you and I both have dealt with as addicts. You know, we want to feel good. We want to have that edge. We want to have that ability to do things better than everybody else, you know, and I think that's that new found perspective in a life where you don't have those things to fall back on is accepting that you're not going to feel 100% every day.
Yeah.
And I'm not perfect by any means, dude. I think there's some days when I definitely feel like I'm not cut out for this new job, but there were days when I felt like that with triathlon. There's days when I feel like that about running. You know, there's days when in track, I felt like I was doing that same thing. Like I've always had those feelings of imposter syndrome when things go south. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that. You know, that's one of the things that bothers me with social media nowadays. I get pissed off when I see these people posting these highlight reels and then I go meet them in person and they talk about all these things they have going on in their life, but yet not one post about it on their Instagram. Yeah. It's like you have 100,000 people following you, listening to what you say about how to have a good day, how to have a good perspective, a good mindset, but yet you won't share that you're depressed. You won't share that you're struggling to get out of bed for 2-3 weeks at a time. You won't share that you're having a bad eating issue, even though you just posted a video on how you only stay away from seed oils or blah, 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 whatever it may be. Like that pisses me off, like pardon my language, but that's kind of why I got out of that whole environment. And I'm not crapping on anybody who does that. You know, I think we're all just learning, but I think there's a big injustice going on in society right now with social media and how many people feel like you can be perfect. You can't. It's just not possible.
When it creates this this pressure or thought that you're a failure because you can't do that. Like if you see an influencer, and I don't want to dive down this rabbit hole too deep either because I could shit on it all day long. But you see an influencer that says like, you know, that you follow their page and you feel like you know their life because you follow their page. And their page might say like, these are the supplements I take every morning. Then this is what I do next. And then this is what I eat for breakfast. And then this is what I eat for lunch. And then this is how I work out. And then this is how I eat dinner. And then this is how I sleep. And you're watching that and you're following that because you're inspired by them. And you do those exact things. And you can do it for months on end and not get anywhere near the same results. And the reason is they're selling you bullshit. That's not everything that they're doing. Or that's not like everything that they're going through. That's not like a full representation of their life, right? And that's what's tough about today's world is people see that though, and they feel like failures because they're not achieving those results by doing exactly what these people are selling them. And at the end of the day, they're salesmen, right? And that's how I look at it. Like I think that there's there's certainly some influencers out there, and they know who they are. You know who they are. I know who they are. Like they're promoting who they are, like really are. And it rubs a lot of people the wrong way. But guess what? That's real life. Like real people cry. Real people are scared. Real people lie. Real people hurt people's feelings. Like it happens.
Real people get depressed. Real people get anxiety.
Yeah.
Real people have bad days with nutrition. You know, it's like.
And real people are addicts.
Real people are addicts.
So, and that's the whole point of this podcast is like to honestly, to truthfully be able to say fuck the stigma, which is like something I keep saying, I keep coming back to. But in order to do that, people got to take, the cloak off and show people who they really are. That's terrifying. I know you've been there. Mm-hmm. It's terrifying, but it's freeing. And so, and it helps so many people along the way. While we're talking about this new path that you're on, I think it's important to bring up, just because you get sober, just because you can do an Ironman, just because you can get a good job, and just because you can try to make the best decisions that you can possibly make, life does not stop swinging. Life never stops swinging. Now, you can certainly make decisions to decide whether you're fighting Jake Paul or Mike Tyson, right? You make a dumb decision, you're fighting prime Mike Tyson. You make a great decision, you still might have to fight a prime Jake Paul, right? Life doesn't stop swinging is the point. And I think that's a massive misconception around people that make good money, or people that can do an Ironman, or people that get sober, that like just that one thing, life simplifies itself. Your problems change as you change, right? Your challenges change as you change. And what I tell people is this: if your challenges aren't evolving, you're not evolving. And so for me, I look at it in that light. Like if I'm presented with a new challenge, it's because I've evolved, or I've digressed, right? Or regressed. I'm not the grammar police over here, and I'm not pretending to be, but it's one of those two words.
Two sides of the spectrum.
Yeah. So like, but if you're facing the same challenges over and over and over again, that's because you're stuck. You're doing the same thing over and over and over again. So I think it's helpful for you to share like kind of how your life's still evolving and life is still hard. You mentioned, and I want to know if you want to get into it or not, but you mentioned your Nana, your grandmother.
Yeah.
And that kind of rising up this week, if you will, and what that's done to you mentally, emotionally, as far as how you can perform at work. But what has it done to you mentally, emotionally as a man?
Yeah. For that one, the whole situation with how that went down has been, it's been weird because I've been so dived into this job, so focused on this. Like, when you're all in on something, like your energy is only focused on that, and about a month ago, she had a bad fall in the bathroom, and she hit her head falling backwards into the tub. And, doctor said she didn't have a concussion. She had to stay at the hospital for a few days while they like monitor her and stuff, but she was relatively fine, from what my aunt and my dad told me. And she was going to have to go through a little bit of some rehabilitation at a nursing home and stuff. And that's all it really was. So I didn't think too much about it, but she was, struggling with some stuff mentally. So like, it was kind of hard for us to call her. So I was kind of letting her go through this situation, and I was going to go see her when everything got better. And then earlier this week, my dad called me. Well, last week they let us know that like her dementia had gotten severely worse. It was spiraling to the point to where, she was forgetting stuff. She was confused about where she was. She would forget about my cousin's wedding that happened a few months ago. It was just all these things that were happening. And I thought I've been prepared for this because, she's getting old, and I've kind of started to notice things over the years that she's forgetful, but the fall just kind of pushed everything forward. And then earlier this week, my dad gave me the call the other night before I called you, that she stopped eating, stopped drinking. She's not really responsive. She's sleeping all day. And it got to a point to where my dad and my aunt decided that they were going to put her on hospice and let her go peacefully. And for me, that's been hard because, her and I are close. You know, we talk on the phone every day. And for 30 minutes to an hour, dude, like a long time. And for me, I don't have regrets with her because I feel like we really have given our relationship everything. But to hope and wait that things were going to get better before I called her, that hurts, you know? And I know she wouldn't want me crying about this, but I know that she'd been telling me for years she's ready to go, and I have a lot of peace with that. But you don't expect these things to happen so fast. Like, I feel like it was just the beginning of the year we were talking about, like, this new job and how, like, one day I was going to take her on a cruise, you know, or one day, like, we're going to go to a most expensive restaurant in Houston and just ball out. And we always talked about stuff like that. And I guess realizing earlier this week that, you know, everything that we could have done is done. You know, we can't have a conversation anymore. She can listen to me and she can hear, but she can't have a conversation. So everything I wanted to talk with her about is not really on the table anymore, you know? And I think wrapping my head around, like, we've all lost grandparents. Everybody loses a grandparent. I'm not trying to make this seem any different than anybody else's, but it's hard for people to understand just what my Nana was to our family. Like, she wasn't just our Nana. She was Nana to so many of our friends growing up. Like, I remember going to parties in high school and people would be like, oh my gosh, like, I've met your Nana, because she lived with my cousins. So, like, they'd come over and she'd meet them, and it's like everybody knew who Nana was. It was just that's just who she was. So for me, it's hard to picture life without her in the picture. And having to work in the midst of all of this is just, it's hard, dude. It's hard. Because in sales, you're not supposed to bring your problems to work. It's an unspoken rule that whatever you're dealing with, leave it outside, come inside, go to work. And nobody's ever said that to me at my job, just making that clear. But that's just the underwritten rule in sales. It's just whatever you're dealing with, tuck it in, man up, get to work. And I've been trying to do that this week. And I've had good days, I've had bad days, but it's hard, dude. It's hard. It's hard trying to dive in and focus on something when you've got this one thing that you feel like you need to be pouring your emotions and energy into. But if you do, you might slack off in your job to a point where you might lose it. It's just a lot of emotions. It's hard to navigate.
Yeah, it's funny how representative that is of a lot of people's lives, though, where it's like you need to have the ability to shelf whatever you're going through to show up a certain way. And what's scary about that is if you do that enough, you stop feeling.
Yeah.
Right. And I was joking about it in the sauna, but there was this guy that used to always tell me, like, man, you gotta feel to heal. And I'd be like, dude, shut up. But it's real. And unfortunately, whether it's professional career or just as men, where it's like you can't show up with your emotions. You're not allowed. Like we've got to be able to say fuck that stigma and find a way to get it out and have these conversations. And like, fortunately for someone like you, you've learned that, like, hey, there's people you can call and have these conversations with. There's a lot of people that don't have that, though. And it's like, it's another reason this podcast exists is to give people hope that, like, those people do exist. You know, you just got to find them.
Yeah, I think you know this I could count on two hands the amount of people that know about it, but 6 months ago, you know, and I brought you and Scott in on what I was dealing with, you know, with my financial situation, you know, just all the stuff that happened last year. Like, I was depressed. I was upset. Like, I would wake up every day. I didn't want to be here. Like, I just couldn't figure out why. I had everything I wanted. Nice house, great dog, great friends, support system, great church, athletic abilities. I'm healthy. I'm a decent looking guy, I'd like to say. Like, I got all these things to be happy about, but I'd wake up and I didn't want to be here, and I couldn't figure out why. You know, I couldn't sleep enough. I'd get 10 hours of sleep and still be exhausted. I'd take 2-3 days off from training because my fatigue was so bad because of how stressed and how depressed I was. And I didn't want to tell anybody. And for me, I felt like if I told somebody, I would be bringing their day down. And I went probably 6-7 months feeling like that. Like, I'd go to a run group or I'd go hang out with friends, and I got so good at shutting off what I was feeling because I didn't want anybody to know that I was struggling. Because if I told somebody I was struggling, that would mean that they would have to sacrifice a little happiness in that day to try and get to my level and help me out or talk me down about it or whatever it may be. So I didn't want to do that to anybody. I didn't want my family to worry about me again. I didn't want you to have to go do your day and have to think about what Matt's going through. I didn't want Scott to have to feel like he's got to stop what he's doing to check on me in the day. Like, I didn't want anybody to have to worry about me, you know? And I think that comes from what we were just talking about is like, as men, you know, they tell you, you grow up, they tell you it's like men, emotions are for women, you know, and I don't agree with that, but I've believed that for a long time. You know, it's like I never wanted to open up about stuff I was dealing with because if I did, then that would show weakness. And if I showed weakness, then that would lower my score as a man. And that's just how it worked in my mind. So I didn't want to tell anybody about what I was going through last year. And then that one day when I went for that 10-mile run, I was just trying to run it off. Like the whole time I was crying, I was sprinting like a 6-minute pace the entire 10 miles, thinking about I couldn't get it out of my head how bad I didn't want to be here. I was like, I don't want to wake up tomorrow. Like, I don't want to try and go harder. I don't want to try and figure this out. Like, it's too hard. Like, I can't do this. And I got home, I walked in, I passed up Jack, and he asked me if I was good, and I was just crying, and I said, I don't want to talk. I went up to my room, I curled up in a ball, and I just cried. And he knocked on the door, and he said, brother, he's like, I love you. He's like, but you need to call somebody. You need to call Scott. You need to call Trip. You need to talk to somebody. And I finally just surrendered. I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Like I'm either gonna end this tomorrow or I'm gonna talk to somebody and try and figure this out. And that's when I called Scott, and he immediately got in the car and was there in 15 minutes. I called my mom while I was waiting on Scott to let her know what I was going on. And I was bawling, dude. Like I couldn't breathe. I was crying so hard. And I'd never cried like that before. And I think it was because I had been holding in so much emotion, going through everything I was going through for those 7-8 months, that I just let it all out. And it's almost like I could not cry enough because of how much I was feeling. And it felt good. If it was a relief, because it was like, dude, like I was holding all of this in for so long. Like, no wonder I felt so bad, you know? And talking with Scott about it, like I opened up to him about so much I was feeling, so much I had regrets about, so much that was eating me alive. And you know, I mean, you're up to date on just about everything at this point. Like, you know so much about me and my story. I called you after and I told you about everything. And, you know, like that kind of kickstarted a new little journey of trying to be like, all right, like it's out on the table and they understand what I'm going through. Like I can figure this out. So got back on a routine, started getting myself together, started looking for a better job to fix my finances, to get that on track. Started to prioritize things that I knew were going to help me and progress me forward. But one thing I learned through all of that is that stigma that men can't talk, that men can't have emotion, nobody's going to tell you that. But it's an unwritten rule in manhood that you don't talk about those things. You just buck up, show up, and get the work done. And you don't cry about it. You don't talk about it. You don't complain about it. You just do it. And what I learned through going through all that was, fuck that, dude. That's bullshit. Like, I'm sorry. I don't agree with that. You can be a man. You can be a man that provides support and shows up in the world and helps people without having to buckle up under your own issues and tuck them in. Like, that's not okay, dude. Like, I've had friends kill themselves over the years because they felt like their issues were so much to deal with that they could not bear the pain of sharing it with somebody.
Well, what you end up doing, I think, to your point, what you end up doing when you bottle it up for long periods of time is you end up hurting the people around you more. Whether that's through a course of addiction. I know a lot of people in my personal life, close life, that their issue has been anger. They're angry.
Yeah.
Pissed off all the time, like will snap at the flip of a switch. That's because they've got some unresolved shit, right, that they need to talk about, but they're not going to do it, right, until it breaks, right, in some form or fashion. It breaks them or the people around them. But what we're doing by holding on to it is much more impactful in a negative way on the people around us than if it were just be like, hey, Matt, if you have time, man, I need to share what's going on with me because it's dark. And then if you get it out, a lot of times it gets lighter, right? That load comes off. And then you're able to be like, have a conversation where it's like, okay, these are the steps to get forward out of it, right? For you, it was finding a change in career, right? Something that motivated you, that excited you, or like left you room to grow and have opportunity. and to get your finances in order, and then your nutrition, and then your exercise. And it's funny how once you do one thing, if you just do the next right thing, how that starts to compound.
Yep.
And what actually happens. And I tell people that, whether it's sobriety, recovery, obesity, whatever the thing is, just do the next right thing, even if it sucks. If you just keep doing that, eventually you'll find yourself in a better place. But what I think, again, what's so powerful about you is so many people want to have this highlight reel of their successes. And you've certainly had them, right? You've had some highs, some high highs. You've had some low lows. But it's okay for people to know that it's not always going to be a high after you get your shit together. You can still have low lows. And that's life, and that's all right. And you can progress through it. But it's about knowing what you just said. You can call people. You can ask for help. You can look for support in all these different areas that don't have to be hidden, right? And so I have the ultimate gratitude for you around so many things. But, to come on here today, we had this scheduled a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. And then we obviously knew what was happening this week in your personal life. And then for you to be like, I think it's important to talk about. To me, that's being a man. That's the most manly thing you can do. Think about it from this angle for me, and this is how I think of it. A man is someone who provides and protects. But you can't be authentic as a man if you're not willing to own your feelings. You're not being real. And part of being a man is being authentic, is being real. And so that's that piece I've added into that triangle, if you will. Provide and protect and be authentic. And underneath authenticity is owning your feelings. And so for you to come share your story today, given what's going on in your personal life, not just to show people like just your successes, but like how deep and how dark it can actually get, and that you're still willing to progress, right? We're going to leave here. You're going to go do what you got to do to take care of yourself today. And then you're going to keep building on that. You're not going to give in to all these different temptations that we all know so well. So I want to thank you for coming today. It's powerful, dude. I love you. And I know this is going to help a lot of people.
I appreciate you, dog. I'm glad we finally got to do this. Yeah. I look up to you like a brother I never had, man. And I have brothers, but you're like a big brother I never had. So I always appreciate you, Trip, and what you're doing with this it's awesome. I think people need to see vulnerability. People need to see that doesn't matter what people go through, how much they're winning. I guarantee you, I've seen it 1,000 times. Your biggest influencers, professional athletes, people who are on the top of their spectrum in their career, like, dude, everybody's fucking going through something. Mm-hmm. Everybody. And the sooner people realize that, the sooner people are going to be more comfortable in their own skin and their own battles, that they can get through what they're going through. You just got to keep waking up and keep going through it, and just understand that tomorrow's not promised. Yesterday is in the past. Today is all I got to work on. And just get to the end of the day and do your best, Yep.
And that's what I tell people. We talk about you have to feel to heal. Sometimes it feels like you can't go through those feelings alone. That's when you need support. That's when you got to ask for help. Until you can get to a place where you can feel what you need to feel in solitude, right? And then you can heal. But it's okay to need that support to get to that point or that place.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that shit at all. And again, we'll plug your social media so people can reach out to you and get in contact with you. Because another thing I know about you is you're willing to be of service.
Always.
If someone says, hey, I need help.
My Instagram and my phone and my inbox is always open for anybody who needs it. I'm never going to shut somebody down for that.
Yeah, because you know what it's like to need to reach out.
And you and I have showed that to each other more times than not in the last couple of years. I know you called me before and needed something when I was in a good place. And I know I've called you more times than not when you're in a good place, I'm in a bad place. And having those people you can rely to call on who aren't going to shit on you for asking for help. You got to keep those people close, man. That's how we grow. That's how we stay on track. And that's how we keep each other in line,
Yep. So if you're listening to this, or you're watching and you're looking for those people, there's two of them sitting right here. You can hit us up, and we'll do our best to be there to support you. But again, I appreciate you, brother. We're going to go ahead and wrap this thing. And I'm getting kind of hungry.
I'm getting hungry, bro. We're going to go get some beef.
Looks likely.
Oh, most likely.
Yeah.
A little raw milk.
Yeah. All right. Well, you guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Matt, thanks for being here. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Ain't Dead Yet podcast.
Let's go, baby.